Every night when we lay down our day and exit the familiar world of waking consciousness, we set sail for the other shore. The dream world comes alive. How did our ancient ancestors view this space? Considered to be the oldest continuous culture on the planet, the originals of what is now called Australia believe that all creation was birthed from what the West termed as the dreaming, the creation of the world, the origins of knowledge. The indigenous tribes of Australia would use shamanic ceremonies and miming dances to enter this space in which all ancestors and all information was attainable. The Westerners who attempted to translate the meaning of this space called it dream time. Even in the Americas, accessing the dreaming realm was a known phenomena among the indigenous.
Indigenous people of this continent are all from the same DNA lineage. It varies, of course, but there is a common DNA thread of all the indigenous people. Basically, they're all related, and all of them had access to what we call dream time. Now, dream time is where the humans have access to information that exists in interdimensional spheres. And the way this was utilized in pre-American times and pre-Hispanic times, before the colonization and the Christianization and all this, where they viewed this as diabolical or useless, was that they would find individuals that had this ability to remember their dreams and to be aware in their dreams, and they would group them into dreamer societies, and they would forge a physical unity through certain dances, through certain songs, through drumming practices. And then they would go into the dream time where they could access visions of the future, visions of the past, visions of other places.
One anomaly of the dream world is the ability of the dreamer to engage with their own subconscious mind. The indigenous didn't use psychological terminology, so they spoke not of the subconscious, but of ancestors, animal guides, and spirits. Psychedelic plants have been known in shamanic cultures for thousands of years to elicit the same effect. However, these effects happen not within times of slumber. Rather, the dream state enters this world of waking life. Yet in both methods, a great deal of therapeutic healing may occur. If the journeyer understands how to engage the dream, like the world of the psychedelic trip. Out of 30 million psychedelic-using Americans, how many truly understand that not only can one actively guide their own experience, but speak with their own subconscious, ask questions directly to it, and begin a process of self-discovery that is at the core of all psychological wellness? Our dreams are known to be easily influenced by the events that happen just beforehand, just like psychedelic journeys. This led to the conversation of set and setting to emerge. In the pre-prohibition psychedelic studies, the unpredictable nature of their effects on each person baffled them.
Well, tell me. Well, I just couldn't. I couldn't possibly tell you. It's here. Can't you feel it? This whole room, this everything is in color, and I can feel the air.
Anthropologist and psychedelic researcher Michael Winkelman has studied the peculiar ability of psychedelics to amplify the expectations of not only the volunteer, but also the researcher.
One of the interesting things that emerged in the early psychiatric research on psychedelics was that very different kinds of effects could be elicited depending upon the orientation of the researcher. So in the beginning, it looked like psychedelics produced various kinds of psychotic breakdowns, and researchers who looked at psychotics with this point of view got their participants to have psychotic breakdowns. Later people started to recognize that some people had these transcendent experiences, mystical experiences, and the researchers that used these substances with that point of view had many of their participants have various kinds of mystical unfoldings. So what this led to was a recognition that there were very important set and setting influences in the unfolding of the biological or pharmacological effects.
How could set and setting influence the outcome of scientific studies to this extent? The phrase set and setting was created by Timothy Leary during the pre-Prohibition studies. He noticed the stark contrast between psychedelic sessions in sterile or clinical environments and compared the results to those done in safe surroundings with the right people. This accounts for the setting. The other component is the set or mindset of the individual about to have the experience. Those in safer and warmer feeling environments reflected that quality in the unfolding of their journey. Others that were without that comfort, typically in interrogation-style rooms, across from analytical witnesses writing notes and remaining emotionally detached, experienced more anxiety and overall difficulty. As these plants are far older than the 60s and their use can be traced back to 40,000-year-old cave paintings, how were our shamanic ancestors dealing with set and setting in their psychedelic experiences?
When you're dealing with a powerful psychedelic, there are a number of elements at play. One of them is your own internal state, your own mental state at the time you take the psychedelic. Another is the psychedelic itself and how it acts on your brain. But much more important in a way is your intention when you go into that ceremony and the setting that surrounds you, that context. And what shamanism done properly does is it pays great attention to the setting in which the psychedelic experience unfolds. To make sure that setting is one that will allow the experience to emerge freely and of itself, rather than being purely a result of the setting. And as to set, it's very important with shamanistic work. And I believe it's very important, I suppose I've drunk ayahuasca approaching 60 or 70 times over the last dozen years or so. It's very important as well what your own intention is when you go into that ceremony. It's not a good idea to just go into it as a blank slate and say, throw me whatever you've got to throw at me. It's a good idea to have an intention. So that is part of the set that you have. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll get what you intended. It's rightly said that what the psychedelics ultimately give you is what you need, not what you want. But it's a good idea to start out with a clear plan that this is I'm undertaking a journey, and this is my purpose in this journey.
Just like entering the unpredictable landscape of a dream, the psychedelic state is a journey into the unknown, and purpose or intention may guide or direct what could be an extremely intense experience. Astronauts enduring the physical and mental training before journeying into worlds unknown were also clear about why they were going into such unpredictable territory. Having such an intention makes the intensity of the unknown seem purposeful and worth the risk. However, ethnobotanist Dennis McKenna adds a caveat to having an intention.
People say you should have an intent. You should have an intent when you take psychedelics. I think that you can have one if there's a specific reason why you're doing it. Then an intention is good. But it's also perfectly legitimate to say my intention is open. My intention is to let the medicine teach me what it wants me to see. That's an intent too. There is no right way to do it. The right way to do it is develop a system that works for you, that optimizes the experience and doesn't get in the way of it, I would say.
The value of an intention is to give a guiding force and a vessel for consciousness to perform within. Not having an intention on the surface doesn't mean that the ingestion of a psychedelic plant and the initiation of a mind-bending journey isn't directed by some inner question or purpose. Just the decision to venture into the unknown comes from a place deeper than the level we make day-to-day decisions from. It is likely that the quickest and most reliable way to know what those drivers are is to take the leap and enter into the mystery of our own mind. Whether through psychedelics, shamanic rituals, or dreams, the experiences can range from brilliant and beautiful to dark and frightening.
When many people enter into a psychedelic experience, it's not just, pretty colors and, exciting feelings. It can also be at times very difficult. And I think that this is in large part due to the fact that the psychedelics release the unconscious. And they seem to force us towards an engagement with the conflicts that we have in our life and the repressed memories that we have about trauma. And so psychedelics can often bring up a variety of different kinds of material that's very difficult for people to accept and to figure out how to move forward with. But that's also the gift of the psychedelics, is that they force us to deal with these issues that we were otherwise able to bury into our unconscious.
As the psychedelic plant begins shifting the neurochemicals in the brain and influencing the hormonal balance of the body, transforming the perspective of the mind and entering you into a realm of unknowns and unpredictability, it becomes increasingly important to know how to intelligently navigate these spaces.
We've grown a lot in the last 50, 60 years, and I realized that set and setting had an almost dogmatic energy to it. That was all there is, and set and setting's not enough. That we have to incorporate skillful use of these medicines to really achieve what we want to do with them. And so I like to think of set and setting as like somebody has a strong intention and desire to be an artist. They have a beautiful canvas, perfect brushes and paints, but they don't know how to paint. And so something's missing. And certain skill sets like the ability to focus, the ability to allow and surrender, the ability to perceive inner states, the ability to navigate these inner states, the ability to heal from particular traumas or explore particular concepts or problems. These are all things that aren't static, that they can be developed over time using mindfulness, using psychological skill sets, and then also in the experience themselves when you know how to use them. And psychedelic community, it's one of the communities that doesn't acknowledge this need for skill explicitly. So what happens is people take a passive role in the experience.
A passive role is typically what most people take towards their initial psychedelic journeys, and the same is seen for the set and setting that most have before sleep. So even our dreams are guided by our passive mindset and environmental settings. Those new to psychedelic experiences typically must acclimate to the new environment and deal with their own fears and desires first. However, once this space is not so new and overwhelming, it must be navigated actively and intentionally. Otherwise, the visions and the entities encountered therein begin to steer the experience in their own direction. The implications of how deep these experiences can go, how endless the psychedelic universe is, and how intense it can be to relive forgotten moments are mind-boggling and not quite accepted by conventional science or medicine. Czech psychiatrist Stanislav Grof discovered that volunteers using psychedelics or even breathing exercises were entering memories that go as far back as the womb and beyond.
And I don't understand why, for example, the fact that birth is such a significant trauma, psychotrauma, doesn't get through. I realized the other day that it was 50 years ago when I first talked about it in an LSD conference in Amsterdam. And I created the four stages, the four perinatal matrices, as I call it, the experiences that people have when they relive these consecutive stages of birth. And it didn't make a dent in the official thinking. I now have the feeling that science, current materialistic science, no matter how sophisticated, is naive if it does not include these hidden dimensions of reality. The psyche is much, much larger than the current model of mainstream psychiatry, which is limited to postnatal biography. There's no recognition that the hours of birth are a psychotrauma. It's bizarre thinking, if you imagine, because we now have A lot of research showing that prenatal experiences are very important. So actually we have many people who have done psychedelics, reliving births, having prenatal experiences, past life experiences, archetypal experiences. And I became very fascinated by how much you can do with such simple means.
Trauma is defined as injury or stress to someone's physical tissues or psychological balance. PTSD in veterans is one example of a drastic rise in reported psychological trauma that psychedelic plants, with proper set and setting, can help with. Imagine how many cases go unreported, and people who will never know that one of the latest treatment discoveries in science is also one of the oldest psychological medicines known to culture.
I never really understood why I suffered from PTSD, and it's only been discovered the past year or two. Prior to that, I'd gone the Western medicine route and gone to psychotherapists and done the Western medicine model of taking a lot of synthetic drugs. And I was on opiates for pain for about 5 years. And it's really controversial, and I don't condone this for anybody, but it was my way to quit cold turkey. I started with mushrooms. The cannabis use helped. I think that psychedelics are going to help with all these issues going forward. My heart just goes out to all these veterans that some of them, their only resource is to, go to the VA, and these doctors are just prescribing them like big bottles of pills. And it used to be 32 guys a day killing themselves. Now it's like 52. And it kills my soul, because these are my brothers. There is a better way, and you don't have to use synthetic drugs. And if it helps just 5 guys out of those 52 not kill themselves, please consider that, because you're talking to a guy who I lived it. And I did everything they said to the letter. And it drove me in a negative feedback cycle where I'm lucky to be sitting here with my life.
Psychedelics allow us to stay with those memories, with the physical sensations without being fully overwhelmed by them. And it allows us to process deep traumas that we wouldn't otherwise have access to because we wouldn't be able to remember them in a normal waking state.
Like remembering a dream, the insights of psychedelic journeys can be fleeting, and the moments when traumas resurface are opportunities to heal and process the unique gift and lesson that every hardship has inherent within it. If there was no room for engagement, the whole event would be more like a dream in which any decisions that are made are subconsciously driven. Actively engaging with a psychedelic experience is turning the dreamlike state into a lucid dream, in which an aspect of the awakened mind gets to make decisions and play with the new rules in this flexible territory. Psychedelic researcher and author David J. Brown wrote the book Dreaming Wide Awake, where he compares and unites the psychedelic experience with lucid dreams.
Lucid dreaming is very much associated with psychedelics because people often have lucid dreams spontaneously right after doing a psychedelic, and there's a lot of similarity between lucid dreaming states and psychedelics. I think that I started having the lucid dreams because of my experience with the ayahuasca. What was probably most interesting about doing the ayahuasca and doing the lucid dreaming was the ability to communicate with this higher intelligence or higher part of myself.
Ayahuasca isn't the only plant medicine acclaimed for its abilities to induce lucid dreaming. Psychedelic researcher and author Chris Bennett has found particular methods for inducing lucid dreams using cannabis.
One of the things that a lot of regular smokers of cannabis, what they call chronic smokers, report is they don't dream very much. They have and this is widely known. And scientists trying to explain this phenomena have suggested that this may be due to a spike in melatonin, which is suggested by some reports to spike as much as 4,000 times the amount of normal waking melatonin levels. Now, using the imperial method, testing substances on yourself, I've noticed if I wake up at about 4 in the morning and smoke some cannabis and go back to bed, I have the most intense dreams, super vivid lucid dreams, and I attribute this to this same spike in melatonin. I'm already into that deeper levels of sleep because I've been asleep for a few hours and just getting up for a few minutes, go back to sleep, and bam, I have the most intense lucid dreams. The type of dreams where you wake up and then go back to sleep and you go back into the same dream, you know, continuous, very vivid.
Most people don't realize that in a lucid dream you could ignore all the characters in the dream, ignore the environment, and simply talk to the dream itself. You know, you just raise your head to the sky, ask the dream questions, and it'll respond to you. You know, it responds either in English, or it'll change the environment in some kind of way, or show you, you know, some kind of answer to your question. And, you know, remarkably, it knows you better than you know yourself. You know, it really shows you amazing things. So that was, you know, one of the major similarities I saw in working with these two spirits, you know, the ayahuasca spirit and the lucid dream spirit, is these two spirits knew me better than I knew myself, and I can ask them any question I wanted, they would have answers. It was like dealing with an oracle.
An oracle from antiquity is typically a person to whom the commoners would travel in order to ask questions about their future. Just like ancient shamans, the oracle would do the work for the commoners. Shamans would imbibe the psychedelic plant and journey into the next world, seeking remedies and answers for the tribe. Similarly, the oracle would often inhale vapor that would alter their perception, or throw tea leaves, or stare into a polished crystal in order to see the coming events. Nowadays, the trend is turning towards interdependence, in which the commoners are taking the shamanic quest themselves. They imbibe their own plant medicine. They use their own oracle decks or scrying bowls and translate the messages themselves. And this fits well with the similarities of psychedelics and lucid dreams. If you can ask your own subconscious mind questions in the midst of a deep sleep, who or what is the one responding? Is it possible that psychedelics, oracles, meditation, and all other modalities of self-development are merely tools to engage the self that we do know of with the parts of ourselves we've never been able to imagine?
So the subconscious mind, when it trusts and it feels safe, can open up big. It can open up childhood trauma, because this is the place where it can happen. This whole psychedelic structure that you may see and the colors, it seems like the neurons of the universe, they are outside the same as inside, and you feel it, you feel connected. It's allowing and it's opening up, and that's what makes it so deep. And then at a certain moment you realize, this is all me. It's just myself. So in this connection of reality that is universe, it's me, it's you, it's there, there's no judgment. So you're confronted with what you're doing, with what you didn't do, with what you could have done, and you come more and more to yourself.
What exactly is the self? How would it show itself in psychedelic journeys or dreams? And how does it communicate? Religious, philosophical, and even scientific circles have been attempting to explain this concept since time immemorial. Many of them seem convinced that their way is the one and only. But is it possible to catch a glimpse of the self through each of these methods and realize that all roads lead not to Rome, but home, the home of the true self? One of the benefits of psychedelic experiences is in how they cause for moments of humility, a reevaluation of the choices and actions that led us to our traumas or illness in the first place. But a look into our past is not the only thing that comes about from these mind-bending plants. There are accounts from the old world of psychedelic journeys rendering people comatose or perceivably dead. And upon returning, visions of hellish or heavenly dimensions were recounted, even visions of the future.
And a large amount of the agent world references are involved in ingested amounts of cannabis, which were potent enough to knock you out for a couple of days, you know, so you would appear comatose to anybody that observed you. But at the same time, there's obviously a lot of mental stimulation going on from the substance as well, because the people that returned after such experiences gave their reports of where they'd been. And in the Zoroastrian religion, a large part of the religious cosmology is derived from people ingesting banga, a potent cannabis extract, infused into wine. And we see this in the stories of both Ardu-Viraf and a king known as Vishtaspa. In Ardu-Viraf's case, he drinks the 7 cups of cannabis-infused wine, and then he lies down and he comes back, and he said that he had been to see both heaven and hell. And Ardu-Viraf's visions, these Zoroastrian visions of heaven and hell, that's where we get the concepts of heaven and hell from. There was no heaven and hell in Judaism. And in the Old Testament, Samuel is raised by the witch of Endor from the pit of Sheol. It's kind of a land of shadows. So this is like a direct experience. This guy had ingested the substances, went to see the lands of the dead where the evil were persecuted and the righteous were rewarded. In Vishtaspa's experience, he saw the end of time. And the Oracle of Hystaspes, which is a Greek version of the name Vishtaspa, was the prototype of what became the Book of Revelation, written along the same sort of lines, predicting the downfall of Rome and these types of things. So here we see people using very, very potent cannabis things with lasting visions that affected history from ever since they had them.
The expanded states of consciousness brought on by these few plants might seem exciting when the focus remains on the visionary, creative, and maybe even the prophetic qualities that they produce. But it should be remembered that to reach these states, large amounts of these substances are consumed, which increase the intensity and unpredictability of the journey. Few seekers are equipped to take on such experiences without trauma. In fact, many psychonauts express their reservations on whether or not just anyone should be using these substances.
There's also a lot of people that these psychedelic things were probably not appropriate for them. And even Terence McKenna said, most people are better off just leaving all this alone. It's not for everybody. People need to work on themselves. It's not a substitute for therapy or family counseling or feng shuiing your house or finding a right livelihood. All those things are important too.
And this isn't for everyone. These experiences are very powerful, very transformative, and they stretch your consciousness, and they're an initiation. But without the cultural container of how we hold people before, during, and after these experiences, people aren't getting the most from it, and they're not having a long-term transformational change.
The cultural container is more than just the environmental setting, more than the mindset going into the experience. It's even more than having the skill sets to navigate these deeply unfamiliar spaces. At the heart of community-based healing, through generations of plant medicine work, is the shaman. This role is dedicated to those who have had significant amount of experience with the medicine and is familiar with how to handle crises. Similar roles to the shaman are now being identified for various purposes as the guide, sitter, or facilitator. In the Johns Hopkins psilocybin studies, Mary Cosimano holds specific guidelines for her role in facilitating other people's psychedelic therapy sessions.
The guide's responsibility is to have a relationship with the participant, with their volunteer. It's really about them feeling safe and comfortable and not judged, and just being able to allow whatever experiences, whatever comes up, whatever feelings, to express them and to allow them.
This type of role responsibility is not new. From shamans to guides to facilitators, the overarching theme is that unnecessary interference in the psychedelic journey of another may complicate the intelligent nature of the psychedelic experience. The guide must keep quiet and only interject for safety or logistical reasons, to allow for the journeyer to listen to the message of the subconscious mind.
And it seems to be a better approach from both learning from studying shamans and from the psychotherapy approach that people have been studying, to just let the person kind of have their own experience and be there with them. You know, be there in case they need you, be there for support if they want to hold your hand, if they have an experience they want to share with you. But don't try to guide the trip. Don't try to navigate for them. Let them navigate themselves has been the more common wisdom that's emerged from MAPS and from some of the other psychedelic schools of thought.
The emergence of new psychedelic research groups like MAPS, ICEERS, Hefter, Beckley, and more are focused on the approach of empowering the individual having the experience with the skills and tools and knowledge of how to use them in order to have a meaningful and safe journey. This empowerment is leading many aspirants to realize that psychedelic plants, lucid dreaming, meditation, dance, and many other modalities are merely tools to access the deeper layers of reality that lie beyond form and appearance, and contain all the events in the past, present, and even future. This is considered to be possible in the same way the originals of Australia believed the realm of the dreaming to exist beyond time and space, so no event, whether in the distant past or far-off future, is truly inaccessible. The originals believed in continuity rather than progress. They believed in the way that relationships integrate into a greater whole rather than isolated roles and functions. They also believed that the land is not to be owned, because the land is what connects us all. It is the reason we are all able to travel and explore, to nest and find shelter, and to enjoy life's gifts. This very land is also home to the numerous creatures we live amongst, as well as the abundance of plant life. And among these plants live a specific variety that usher in visions of animal guides, ancestors, otherworldly beings, and a glimpse at the future we are creating right now on this planet. What can we learn from these visions that emerge from the subconscious mind, from the space beyond space and the time beyond time? What can we learn from the shamanic traditions of antiquity and their modern revisions today? What skills can we learn by entering these deep layers of the self and navigating with intention? And what lessons can we bring back to this world to balance the unsustainable changes happening here? Perhaps with the support of highly informed communities with the highest intentions, we can empower the masses to take responsibility for their own healing, their own transformation, and once and for all, engage the dream. Up next, join us as we explore the importance and art of integrating psychedelic experiences.